Assalamu alaikum. My question is for Brother Muharib. MashaAllah, this seems to be a very complex program, which for people who aren't technically savvy is perhaps a bit intimidating. But the question that I have is clarification about how exactly this falls into the greater Kalam paradigm. And I think perhaps this has to do with clarifying what the definition of the word Kalam itself actually is. If Kalam is to be defined as creating arguments in defense of our creed, then what bearing does a system like this have on actually creating arguments? I'm not an expert on artificial intelligence, but can a computer actually make arguments the way that a human being can, actual rational arguments as opposed to pre-programmed arguments through the programming that comes from the programmer? So just kind of trying to figure out what bearing does this have on the science itself.
Okay, next, brother at the back.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum. My name is Kareem. So basically, I have a number of questions. The first one is, how is this different to a search engine? It looks to me like algorithms. It looks like something like a search engine, like Maktaba Shamila. If I want to look up something, I can look it up. I'm not too convinced about artificial intelligence, and AI people I know are very sort of up about it, but you know, it's essentially a human construct. It's somebody constructing based on algorithms. The real problem with this for me, and this is what I wanted to get to, is if we are working on the level of keywords and terms, language, human language has multiple meanings that are possible for a term. Things can be metaphorical, things can be haqiqa and majaz. So a computer does not understand majaz unless you program this into it. But then again, we have in the Islamic tradition the issue of multiple possible readings of a text. So you can have a text that somebody says means this, and another person says, no, well, actually the meaning is this. And this is a common problem. Also, if we're just plugging in definitions, we make it a search engine and we say, okay, Taftazani said this, E.G. said this, the Maturidi said this, the Shia Ithna Ashari said this. People have different mustalah. So a Shi'i text might use the same word, but for them, they have a different understanding of what that word means to Al-Iji, and maybe Iji was different to the Ash'ari himself. So how can a system tell me what is being meant? We still need a human mind to grapple with this. Otherwise, again, it's just a search engine. I plug it in. You said also that people can then give in their interpretations. And so for me, it looks like an advanced search engine, social media kind of platform where Abdul Rahman comes, I come, Firas comes, we all plug in our own understanding. But, you know, how is this a Kalam activity? It seems to be like more like a collection of things that we're collecting data. But yeah, so if you can show me how this is able to give me something new rather than just a collection of things. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Next, brothers in the middle.
Just two questions for Dr. Sadolsky. The first is the critique of what the subject matter and the purpose of Kalam is. The Mutakallimun who said that it's the mawjood, they didn't say the mawjood, and they're trying to come up with a theory of all reality. They didn't ever say that. And when they said the ma'loom, they didn't say they want to come to knowledge of everything. They want to study everything which exists insofar as it relates to affirming religious doctrines by providing arguments and responding to objections. It's not merely, and in fact, I mean, your objection might just be semantic ultimately, like just a khilaf lafzi. Because when you say, we just want to study religious doctrine based on proofs, and those proofs need to be yaqini. As the mutakallimun have all explained, there are things which are wasa'il. So if you're going to do that, necessarily you will have to engage with other subjects in order to construct your arguments. You're not just going to pull them out of the sources. I don't think you meant that. I just think that the argument was...
all right.
So there was like a bit of a caricature as well of the Mu'tazili position. It's not really that much different from the Maturidi position. The fact that the third category, that the fi'l in itself, the act, the human act in itself, is either praiseworthy and blameworthy in and of itself. And the second part is that it deserves aqlan, necessarily punishment and reward in the afterlife. They both agree on that position. The only difference is that the Maturidiyya will say, if God decides to act, then He acts according to hikmah. So they're still committed to a best of all possible worlds universe. And they still, when you said that God determines, in the Maturidi model, God determines what is good, and then revelation indicates. The Ash'ari will just tell you that the revelation is merely an expression of God's determination. It's not that there's, that isn't really where the difference of opinion is. And lastly, the fact that you can have discussions, I mean, that's not true. That's just like saying that anyone with an instrumentalist or a teleological ethics can't have a discussion about ethics with other people, right? So if in the Hashia of Taftazani, Ansar al-Sharia, he says, no one doubts that with the intellect, according to the Ada, we can tell that certain acts are not good for people and some acts are good for people. There's a difference between saying that, which you can easily have a conversation about, and saying that this act necessarily requires punishment or reward in the afterlife. Thank you.
Thanks, I'm Omar. My question really follows on from Abdul Rahman's. That perspective you just presented right at the end is basically Razi's later position, as I understand it. For him, the discussion seems to revolve around it's a teleological ethics, right? You can have this discussion, but you can't really say anything meaningful without revelation on the punishment for acts. This seems to be his key contribution. I also had a question about slightly off topic, but I mean, have you looked at the earliest Hanafi sources on this question of Husn and Qubh, and would you be able to say something about them, if that's okay?
All right, thank you very much. I think, okay, Doctor?
Yeah, I just have a comment actually about what Muhammad Stodorsky has said. I would say that Kalam is the rival of philosophy. That's how it was developed. So Kalam therefore can study actually every problem in creed and life. Incidentally, if good and bad are subject matters of Kalam, as he explained in his talk, then everything could be subject of Kalam, because everything contains good and bad, isn't it? Second, to say that Kalam is limited to the problem concerning divinity is to confine it to a very limited circle. It's like saying that Islam should be concerned only with rituals and should be practiced inside mosques. And this would limit the validity of Islam in life. In my opinion, Kalam should cover everything possible. Sometimes it's not possible to discuss certain things in certain areas. Kalam has not have the tool to discuss them. Okay, but later on we develop the tools. We can develop the tools. Concerning the presentation of Muharib, I would say I'm dreaming of that this system will be the Islamic hermeneutics. You know, a year ago nearly we had a symposium in Amman about I think the Maturidi Kalam, was it, where three professors from one from the United States and two from Britain attended, and we discussed. They tried to bring to the table that we should adopt the hermeneutic analysis of the Quran. And I said, I had a long comment by which I showed that Quran specifically cannot be subjected to the standard hermeneutic analysis for reasons concerning the structure of the Quran. The structure of the Quran is so different from other text structures that cannot lend itself to hermeneutic analysis. But if we want to have a hermeneutic analysis, then it would be Kalam only. That is to say, the system of analysis from within Islam can deal with the Quran. This will be successful. Otherwise, we will miss. We will have a mess. Also, we, in reply perhaps also to one of the questions, we are not going to bring into our database at this stage the books of E.G. or Maturidis or Ash'aris or Mu'tazilis. I think that what we are aiming at, that Engineer Muharib will consider my presentation of Kalam and categorizing. That's why he said in one word, metrication procedure provided by Al-Tai. That's what it means. It means that he is relying on my own interpretation or understanding of the whole legacy of Kalam. You see, at this stage. At a later stage, somebody else, maybe, for example, Abdul Rahman, our friend Abdul Rahman, or can take the initiative to include Al-Fakhr Razi in the system. Other will take an E.G. and introduce, and that's what he is calling for. That, I mean to say, it is an open gate that can be developed further by other researchers, not limited to our understanding. But as far as we are concerned, we are to put our understanding in the beginning. Later on, other peoples can also introduce their own.
All right, thank you very much. All right, thank you very much, Prof. Basil, for your observations. Maybe I can take another one last question for the first round. Okay, Doctor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this about again the scope and subject matter of Kalam. So if we see Kalam as a system of analytic, discursive logic to investigate the claims and conclusions of all the sciences insofar as they are not value neutral and thus involve or entail ontic, epistemic, and axiologic commitments that impact directly or indirectly on our aqidah or on our usul, then Kalam scope. I mean, then the scope of Kalam will involve all the sciences. As an example, Kalam and economics. So for example, like conventionally, economics has is defined as the allocation of scarce resources to fulfill unlimited human wants. Now, that definition is standard since the early 20s. That definition involves cosmological commitment, scarcity, and involves psychological commitment or axiological commitments. And these commitments have both direct and indirect impact on Islamic ethics, on Islamic ontology, and on Islamic cosmology. So, given that fact, it's true, I agree with Brother that it's good, we need to have quality control, right? But if we emphasize too much on quality control, then we only have a chef Fudor and a toy, and we will not be in a position to have this a session in which we need to, at least I think this session, a session like this, are important to expose or to promote the importance of the Kalam method of analysis to students. And finally, if you're serious about Islamization and not temporalizing, which you're not just grafting the Hadith and Quran to whatever sciences, all students must, I mean, it's wajib now because we're all exposed to all the sciences, right? So it's important, I think it's wajib for all students to have a strong grounding in the Kalam method of investigative discourse. Thank you. And they must know how to apply the Kalam investigative method to all the science, to each and every science they are involved in. Right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Now I request any of the presenters to respond to those questions. Yes, please.
First, the first question from the, what is your name? From Mr. Firas about can the system conduct an argument? Yes, the system can even challenge you and conduct a gap analysis in your argument through the decision tree. When you apply from the database a lot of arguments and analysis, the system will try to understand the conceptual method of this argument and trying to identify the gap of this analysis based on metrication procedure, predefined metrication procedures of the overall Kalam. And when you conduct your analysis, the system will challenge you about this analysis and asking you many questions to be answered. Yes?
Can I just ask, how is that better than a mutakallim analyzing my argument?
Okay. Have you used the YouTube or Google? Yes, fine. Sometimes when you open YouTube, how the system recognize the preferred channels and YouTube videos that you are visiting from time to time. Yeah, algorithms, exactly. It's the same concept. The system will be built based on using algorithms and logic from different mutakallimun. So the brain of the system is bigger than you, bigger than millions of people. When we feed the system with more data, the system brain will increase and the analysis concept will be more complex and can conduct hundreds and thousands of questions, an argument with you. And you will end up with 1 month to answer these questions. Is that okay? Have you conduct any questionnaires? When you answer the question, the easy question, the system will take you to the more difficult question. How the system recognize this?
I think there's still the related problem which Karim was talking about then of how can you have a system that understands better than the past 1400 years of Islamic tradition.
How the robotics are developed. The robotics now, the robotics, they have emotionals and they react like a human, and they can drive also.
But those robots are programmed to react in that way. They don't actually have a conscious of their own.
This is more complicated than the Kalam concept. It's very, very complicated to recognize the people feels and looks in front of you and react based on it. It's so difficult. Nowadays, Google is developing an auto car. We are, as a human, when we drive a car, we are subject to sudden accident, or sometimes any child pass the road, and you have to stop suddenly, how the car recognized this. This is more difficult than the Kalam concept. Kalam's concept, it's in general, it's like it is an argument. So you are dealing with text. Yeah. And the most easiest part in the artificial intelligence is dealing with text analysis. Because you are dealing with letters. And every word has meaning. That's very simple.
I just want to add that if you can go to the website of Leeds University, text analysis, you will see Leeds University has developed already a system of text analysis in the Quran. Muharib thinks that this system in Leeds University is too primitive to what we should develop. Exactly. But I was very happy to see that, because this is something which makes me confident that we can do this. When I saw Leeds University achievement, which I 2 years ago I couldn't dream of, now I am much more confident that our system can be developed, maybe to the level which we are dreaming of. If not, it will be developed to some acceptable level, certainly.
Yeah, exactly. And on the other side, we have an interactive gate. Just feed the system with all information and analysis, and we will conduct a data mining on it. We will see your opinion, and we will understand the way you think and the way you analyze. And after some time, you will see that we can judge on behalf of you. On behalf of Mr. Attai, Dr. Professor Attai, the system even will, on behalf of me, can judge the analysis based on the previous and historical data from the system.
All right, thank you very much. Maybe
the other
Dr.
question
Rahman.
we have also.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
From Mr. What is your name?
My name is Kareem. But now, after everything you said, I have to add something.
Anyway, to clarify one point. On the beginning of my presentation, I have said the system will be built based on the new concept, a new approach of Kalam that has been developed and enhanced by Dr. Professor Attai on the first stage. On the second stage, we may go further to the next level and bring another mutakallimun and trying to apply the same concept and see where are those gaps and resolve any additional gaps and fill any and trying to fill any gaps between the concept of Attai and concept of late and old mutakallimun.
Okay.
Because our main goal is to come up with a new kalam, not to stick the historical information.
I accept that you could plug in Dr. Ta'i's system into yours, because Dr. Ta'i, what he does, in my understanding, maybe he can correct me, Dr. Ta'i is a physicist. He ties in the Quran to physical sciences and arguments. Science is something you can break down into parts. Scriptural hermeneutics, Al-Maturidi's famous tafsir is called Ta'wilat Ahl Sunnah. Ta'wil, he was doing a ta'wil of the Quran, and ta'wil is something that goes beyond mere linking of words to things. If we link words to concepts, numbers, you can say that this ayah has this key word, it kind of reminds me of, the cosmos, so words that indicate the cosmos or something, and we talk about the cosmos. But when you look at ta'wil, and these things, these are highly subjective endeavors. These require a conscious being. And it goes back to yesterday's debate about, the ghost in the machine and consciousness, and is really the human being no more value added than a calculator. So I believe that if you do start on the basis of Dr. Ta'i's way of looking at things, and that's his own way, that's what he likes to do, and he's good at that, I think it can work. But once we come to really what the old kalam was, and if we bring in things like ta'wil, I don't know. I'm not convinced. Yeah.
Fine. The answer is very simple. Are you using Twitter in the social media? Yeah. And in the social media, Twitter, it's very complicated model, and people are feeding the system with their shortcuts and short words, and trying sometimes to use their own way to express their opinion about any hot subject. Is the ta'wilat difficult than this concept?
Yes.
I don't think so.
It's different. Ta'wil is different to what tweeting
Ta'wilat
hashtags.
has a mechanism to deal with. On the other side, Twitter, every single person has own mechanism to deal with. The government in the US and Western, and also in the Eastern, and also even in the Arab world, trying to analyze the Twitter and social media to come up with the analysis of the users and their directions. Yeah. This is a way advanced than ta'wilat. Ta'wilat, at least you can understand it and trying to build your own mechanism. If you can understand ta'wilat, that means ta'wilat is simple. It's easy to design a predictive model for it, and trying to build a preliminary predictive model and improve that model to next levels.
Can I give you an example of what I mean?
Yeah, give me an example.
Okay.
Can you allow others, please?
I will open actually few more questions for the second round. Let's finish first with the first round.
Yes.
Okay, so if I use the word orange in my Twitter page and he uses orange in Twitter, all these guys like oranges, they all mention orange. That does not tell me about the flavor of orange, what I think orange tastes like. He thinks that orange tastes closer to watermelon than to kiwi. None of this stuff will come through. These are things that are experiential. They cannot come into mere terminal, linguistic analysis. Yeah.
Explain this, but again, you are coming with a new questions, and you forget my answers. I'm telling you that they have their own shortcut, their own terms, signatures, and sometimes the shortcut to make the words ununderstandable in a way that nobody can analyze it. To just trying to give another direction to the owner of Twitter, to the management of Twitter. So those terms are totally out of the normal and the normal mechanism of words in general language. Ta'wilat has a very, I think, how many ta'wil we have?
Infinite. You can have an infinite number of ta'wils to things.
That's
logically,
fine.
right?
That's fine. How many terms you can build with yourself, for yourself, in 1 minute? You can have 100 of terms and plug it on the system, and nobody will understand this. But after sometimes the analysis will recognize that your goal objective behind this term is this. So I think ta'wilat, it's much easier than the social media, and a way easier than the social media. Thank you.
Actually, I don't want to comment, but I'm forced to participate during this discussion. We need to understand one important dimension of the Quran. It was not revealed at a time the whole. It took long 23 years of a time. Why? Allah did not reveal Quran at a time. My worry is that are we trying to reduce the Quran to the level of a mechanism depending on a machine, number one. Number two, please be patient. Number two, whatever we feed, can artificial intelligence go beyond that? Number three, what is the purpose of the revelation of the Quran? A scholarly debate or the construction of human societies? When we participate in the process of development or reformation of human being and human societies according to our own vision of man, vision of life, vision of society, we benefit from the wisdom of the Quran. If we are not participating, not involving in the process of reformation of the society, just sitting with the computer and trying to analyze different aspects of the Quran, how come wisdom be revealed to our mind and our heart? That is the big issue, and we should not forget that all Kalami-based discourse, if we relate to the absolute truth and reality of this world, that Allah exists, and Allah guides man how to live on this earth. Allah provides knowledge for the guidance of mankind, how to develop society. We should not forget the vision of life, the vision of society. At the moment, the whole world is motivating in a different direction, which is directly confronting with the spiritual vision of life and society. Should we become the part and parcel of that? There are a lot of intellectual thinkers who have given warnings that world is moving towards self-destruction. I can quote a number of professors, authors who have said that the entire world is at the brink of committing suicide. Should we want to become the part of that? These are the questions we must take into consideration when we are applying technology with full due respect to everybody. I'm impressed by your presentation, no doubt. It is technically highly qualified and intellectually and academically impressive. But the implications of all these are going to be a waste or to be security, peace, prosperity of the poor people of this world. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Prof. Mumtaz. You have any other question?
Yes, I do. I mean, technology is something that we have to contend with. And I think the issue is not that, we don't have to develop technologies which are smart and which are contextual and so on. But I think that we have to construct things in a much more sensitive manner. Because I'm a heavy user of Twitter, of social media. And I hate the way that the mechanism works to predict or what the machine thinks that I ought to like, I ought to see, I ought to read. I defy it. Because I feel all the time that much of the time it gets my intentions or my preferences wrong. The keywords that I search are not necessarily the stuff I like, or sometimes I'm forced to search certain things because of the work I do. But then it also gets that wrong. In its preferential choice of what I want to read, it gets even that preference wrong most of the time. And he ends up giving me stuff that I don't need. It's low in quality, it's badly written, or information that really it's worthless for me. So I don't necessarily think that what we find out there at the moment that we call intelligent is really that intelligent. Secondly, we at Kalam Research Media do understand that there's a need for technology, okay? And that has to be developed to somehow enhance the tools of our own resources. Not that they replace, what human beings need to do, but that they can be aids, to make our work easier, perhaps, in some cases. I remember when I was a young student at the university, I was talking to Ziauddin Sardar. And he comes from a particular school and perspective of what the tradition should be. And he said, Suhail, we don't really need hadith experts anymore. Why spend time memorizing hadith or Quran or becoming a hafiz when you now just have this small CD-ROM that has the entire text of hadith database? You can just search a word. And I laughed at him because I used to do hermeneutics. And we know that it's not just a question of searching for a word. The issue of how to understand that word in context with people is a different game altogether. And it's easy to misunderstand a text by simply understanding literal words. And we know, we've suffered as an ummah the consequences of misunderstanding texts without contextual authoritative narratives, or frameworks, environments that put that particular text and word in a context that has wisdom in its application. Otherwise, if I was to search for a question now on Google, what does Islam say about this? 90% of the time I get an answer from Mr. Google, that's probably someone at the other end who's an extremist who's produced this answer, who's not even attached to a community of scholars, who has absolutely no moral responsibility to answer to anyone. But I've taken that answer and now I live with it. So what are the filters that we use? I understand the mechanism requires us to input data from our side. And that community of data accumulates, and then the machine can perhaps extrapolate from this and come up with patterns of answers. But I don't think it's enough. Machines need to be worked by individuals. They need to be contextually used by individuals at the end of the day, because those are the ones that hold wisdom. Machines can't do that for us. They are mechanical at the end of the day. And the one thing they don't understand is things like mercy, or appropriateness of an answer to an individual. We know that from our teachers, that sometimes the same answer can't be given to two sets of people who are seemingly different, because it may lead to different outcomes. But that's a judgment that teachers need to make, given the specificity of the person that they have in front of them. So I think there's a long way to go. Okay, this is a start, but it's going to require a lot of consultation. It's going to require a lot of thinking through the problems that it has inherent in it.
All right, thank you, sir.
And develop accordingly.
Okay, thank you, sir. I actually see a lot of hands. We have received a very good response from the audience. I don't know whether I allow this brother.
One important.
Okay, you want to respond first?
To the three gentlemen.
Because I'm thinking that I should be fair to the others.
And Mumtaz and
okay.
The important thing which you are overlooking is that the system is interactive. The system is not, our system is not input-output. It's not like that. It's interactive. Unless you follow up every step and you interfere, it will not give you any result. Exactly. It can't give you any result. Second, Al-Tai's Daqiq al-Kalam or Kalam has identified the genes, certain genes, which are called principles. And the analysis is done with this principle. But always you have to be in front of the laptop or whatever, the desktop you are using. If you don't interfere up to the very last moment, including the context is taken from the whole text. It's not word treatment on a word level. No, not at all. It deals with the whole surah, for example. Sometimes. If you put or you request dealing with the whole text, it will deal with the whole text. And give you some result which you may accept or reject, by the way. You can reject, and you look for another alternative. After all, it is an aid only.
Agree with you.
Aid.
It must remain as aid. We cannot give more importance than that. No, I said, my dear brother, watching you carefully, listening you carefully, when I realized that we are just crossing some limit, so I interfere in that. And what is that my concern, you know? My concern is that 23 years Allah took to reveal the Quran. I want just, we all should reflect on that. Why Allah did not send Quran at a time? Why 23 years? Because, you know, when we involve in the process of reformation of society, the wisdom comes through the reading of the Quran. So, no, my concern is only this, that we have to understand that all this computer-based technology is our servant. We are not their servant. That is my concern. Okay.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. Mumtaz. May I allow this brother? Thank you very much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Muhammad Ikhwan. I just have many of the comments that has been discussed echoed what I have in mind. If I may, to just summarize what the system that was proposed by Dr. Muharrib, it is you use artificial intelligence. I mean, it receives feedback and it builds upon those feedback. So once you input Professor Basil's feedback, principles and perhaps other mutakallims, I imagine it to be eventually like a super mutakallim like that. But having said that, any system, the database system, it is still a formal system. It's based on, as you said, ultimately zeros and ones. And there's logic behind it. And this logic is basically sets of rules with preset axioms. So it is a formal system. Now, do we accept that the totality of human knowledge and our understanding can be captured or encapsulated by this set of systems? If we accept this, if we accept that all knowledge that we can possibly understand can be encapsulated by this system, then it is subjected to what Gödel said to be the incompleteness theorem, that it's either you want it to be consistent or you want it to be complete. If you insist that it is consistent, then it will never be complete. Okay, that is my first comment. And the second comment, all these discussions reminds me of what Professor Atas always said, that imagine that if we have the sight of an eagle, and so the sight of an eagle is very sharp, it can see through things from afar, and say the hearing of bats, and the other senses, the senses of the snake, then the world, the universe will appear very different. It's not as it is. And if the world, the physical existence are ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and behind these ayat are signs that points to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us within these boundaries, within these limitations, then perhaps we are meant to see it from within these limitations. Otherwise, meaning will perish. The same way, suppose that we have a supercomputer for a brain, and we can do analysis of this magnitude. Is that would that lead to arrival at meaning, and subsequent arrival at knowledge as what knowledge is meant to be? And if we can go back to our mutakallims definitions of knowledge, for instance, Al-Maturidi defined it as sifatun yatajalla biha al-madhkur liman qamat hiya bih, al-i'tiqad al-jazim al-mutabiq lil-waqi, and the rest. So can this, because I see that these are two different universes. Thank you very much.
Yes, if you want to respond.
In a simple way and briefly, would you like to be a super mutakallim? No? You yourself. Would you like to be a super mutakallim? Just answer yes or no.
No. No. If super mutakallim is this totality of this database, then
you will be the super mutakallim. The system will just help you. It is an aid. It is not replacing the mutakallimun. It's just an aid to formulate your structural of analysis. It's not going to replace the mutakallimun. Because Kalam science, it's really wide and huge, and a lot of arguments are there. So if you would like to be a super mutakallim, you need to utilize the latest tool on this century. Use the intelligence, the artificial intelligence, the data science applications. So instead of reading one book, you will have thousands of books. This is as a search engine. In addition to this, you will have the analytical tools that will help you to improve your analysis and give you different perspective and give you also a visualized area so you can see a lot of gaps instead of reading one or two books. You will be the super mutakallim, not the system. The system will be just an aid for you, an assistant for you. That's all.
All right. All right. Thank you very much. Actually, we will stop for lunch at 1:30. So I will allow another 2 questions. Yes. One, please, from this brother sitting in front.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Syed. I just want to clarify that this system, we can say that it is a guide. A guide. Like Maktabah Syamilah, if we have the basic, we learn something, and then we want to refer, because we have the basic, and then we refer to Maktabah Syamilah, and it will be not a problem. But if we don't have anything, and suddenly we're trying to be the one who know everything, and it will be a massive problem to us. And this is, I think that is, I understand that this system will be a guide, but we should not neglect the importance to learn and to learn. And that's all.
Of course, this is right, correct. It's not only a Maktaba Shamila, it is also, you have many analysis tools that you can use to help you. And after some time, the system will improve itself in a certain level based on the historical data to help you for further enhancement of Kalam science, not to stick to that level. So your mind will have different perspectives, and you can visualize something that you can't visualize it before the system. That's all. It is an aid.
May I request Dr. Studolski to respond to the question posed to you before?
The issue is how is the Maturidi position different from the Mu'tazili position? I think it's different in several ways, which I tried to address in the presentation, but I think one important difference is that might not have come across is the issue of the difference between istihqaq and ijab. And the way that works is the Mu'tazili, right? They're saying that a bad action, whether its status is revealed in revelation or not, necessitates, not only deserves, but necessitates divine punishment. Okay? So this is not what the Hanafi Maturidi Usuliyun say. They do not say that the moral quality of an action necessitates punishment. So I think that's the fundamental difference in terms of eschatology, that as you know, the Mu'tazili doctrine was that if somebody commits a grave sin and he doesn't repent, his doomed to eternal punishment in hell, right? Which is not the Hanafi Maturidi position. To say that it is a bad action and it deserves punishment is different from saying it necessitates punishment, because we acknowledge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's immense mercy and say that even if an action is blameworthy and deserves punishment, Allah with His mercy might decide to forgive the person. So I think that's a fundamental difference between the Hanafi position and the Maturidi position and the Mu'tazili position. That again we say what? Obligation, necessity can only be learned through revelation, right? But what we're saying is reason can determine the inherent goodness or badness of some actions. So that's number one. Number two is, you're saying, well, what's the difference between saying Allah decides the moral status of an action and revelation decides the moral status of an action? The difference comes out in a person who doesn't have access to revelation. Can this person, through reason, know the moral status of certain actions without access, without knowledge of revelation? And we say yes, right? A person who doesn't have access to revelation can still know that ungratefulness is bad, that killing, stealing, lying, arrogance, these things are bad, and that revelation is a source of knowledge and reason is another source of knowledge. So, I don't know if that answers your concerns. As regards the issue of, saying, this Kalam only is interested in mawjudat as regards its, indicating the realities of divinity. That's something different than what has been proposed in this meeting, right? As Professor Altay has suggested, they're thinking about it as what? As a sort of platform to understand everything. So I was trying to address that approach. And also, I would say even in the, among, pre-modern mutakallimun, you do get a sense of that. How is that, for example, on the issues of, the reality of the indivisible substance, whether it consists of a point or 3 points, 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, that doesn't really affect any divine reality. And it is something that they discuss, right? So there are discussions in pre-modern Kalam works that are more about the reality of reality as opposed to its as opposed to being directly connected to divinity. The reason I think I'm making this, I'm trying to demarcate the boundaries of a dialogue between Kalam and other sciences is because of a certain problem, right? So on the issue of talqih, right? On the cross-pollination of date palms. The Prophet ﷺ said, according to narration of Muslim, rahimahullah, أنتم عالموا بأمر دنياكم. According to narration of Imam Ahmed, إذا كان شيء من أمر دنياكم فأنتم عالموا به. إذا كان من أمر دينكم فإليه. Okay? So now, what happens is, when we make Kalam a sort of platform to study everything, the danger is this. In the past 1400 years, has our Aqidah changed? No, it hasn't changed. It's the same. Has science changed? It has changed a lot, right? Even in the last century, it's changed from the classical deterministic physics of Newton to relativity Einstein to quantum physics, so on and so forth, right? So what we're saying is that the danger of associating Kalam with these funun based upon zunun is precisely what Professor Altay didn't like about the presentation of our brother, that people will start talking about cosmic kebabs and plates. Okay? And so what happens is, if you associate zunun with kalam, and those zunun, when they're replaced or found to be wrong, who might do what? Might associate those mistakes with the deen.
Even tafsir is based on dhunun.
Right.
Even your understanding of the Quran is based on dhunun.
But kalam is... Right, that's true. But
everything is dhunun.
no, not everything is dhunun. You can't say that. If you say that, that will be kufr. That's not, no. Inna zanna la yughni min al-haqq shay'a. The creed, the aqidah must be based upon haqq. It cannot be based on zan. You cannot say the aqidah basis on zunun. That's completely wrong. You cannot say that. The aqidah has to be based on haqq. It has to be based on yaqeen. It has to be based on ilm. It cannot be based on zunun. So that's what I'm saying, is once you associate the study and proof of aqidah based on haqq and yaqeen and ilm with ulum and funun that are based on zunun, then that incorporates the danger.
I am not judging aqidah with quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
I am judging quantum mechanics with aqidah. This is the way.
No, I'm not talking about you. But what I'm talking about, what I'm talking. That's true, but that's why fiqh is a different ilm than kalam, right? Fiqh is a different ilm from usul-ud-din. It has a different standard of evidence.
Yeah, the question is concerning mu'amalat. And mu'amalat, you need fiqh. And fiqh is based on dhunun. Otherwise, we wouldn't have four madhahib.
Yes, but fiqh is based on both qati and zanni evidence, but aqidah has to be based on qati evidence alone. It cannot be based upon zunun. That's what I'm saying. So that's, if you associate ilm based upon yaqeen with funun based upon zunun, then people, when they see that those zunun are being replaced or rejected, they might what? Form a misunderstanding of the aqidah and the deen. So that's the danger I see, that we have to have a dialogue for sure. We say that every Muslim understanding of effort of understanding reality has to be based upon, rooted in the usul-ud-din. But to say that let's make one soup out of everything, I think that's the disadvantage I see, as the Prophet ﷺ indicated in the show Talqih, right? That if there's a misunderstanding, there's a change, there's a new paradigm, whatever, that people will say, well, okay, just as you saw, that people will say, okay, this these people got this entirely wrong. Why should I follow this deen?
All right.
But the aqidah hasn't changed. The aqidah in 1400 years hasn't changed. Why? Because it's based on haqq, it's based on ilm, it's based on yaqeen. It's not based on zunun. So that's why I think we have to keep what is based on yaqeen separate, but in dialogue with, in kalam with, what is based on zan. That's my limited understanding of this.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. Okay, so on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to thank the three presenters for this session for very fruitful sharings, and also special thanks to the audience here in the Senate Hall for your very active participation, for your very active deliberation. I appreciate it a lot. So I end this session with Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.